Well, welcome back to the Steve Maggs Muscle Car Show podcast. You're probably listening to us on Spotify or Google Play or iTunes, etc. Or maybe you're watching right now on my YouTube channel. Either way, thanks for tuning in. And as we know, this is where I read from my 2013 book, Stephen Yanti's 1001 Muscle Car Facts. And of course, so far we've worked our way through GM, Ford, and now we're actually into the Plymouth part. And actually on this show, we'll transition from Plymouth into Dodge facts, as indicated by these two cool MPC models from 1971, the Plymouth 71 Superbird, of which they never made any in real life, and of course the 69 Charger Daytona. But again, these cool models indicate the fact we will be switching from Plymouth to Dodge halfway through the show. But the entire show, as always, is sponsored by our friends at OCTAIN Classics, the Northeast's largest muscle car and supercar dealership located at 143 Washington Street in Auburn, Massachusetts. Our friend Dan Marinelli and the staff at OCTAIN Classics, they buy and sell and service muscle cars and exotics. So give them a call at 508-859-4515 to learn what they have in stock now and if they can maybe help you with a restoration or service of your personal muscle car or exotic. Okay, let's get started here. And this is the end of the number crunching and press commentary chapter of the Plymouth world. Now, again, this is show number 48. Let's start it with fact 697. And we're talking about insurance and the ugly days of the early 70s, which kind of brought an end to the muscle car era. Here we go. The insurance industry clampdown explains odd combinations such as the 340 Roadrunner. New for 1971, it's 13.62 pounds per horsepower, weight to horsepower ratio, fell safely outside the surcharge zone. 1,681 of these cars, 340 Roadrunners, were built. Of them, 1,243 had automatics and 438 with manual transmissions. And again, these are small block Roadrunners, 1971, the first year for that. Still, insurers seeking to minimize losses caused by young drivers in fast cars soon countered by applying surcharges on what they consider to be performance models, regardless of engine size. So it is true that the junior supercar of the early 70s was something that was conjured by Detroit to get around the idea that as we saw in the last episode, that the insurance companies were actually imposing surcharges based on weight to horsepower. So a 340 Roadrunner, although it's a great handling little car, was only exempt for a little while before it was also recognized as a performance model and zapped with an insurance surcharge. Okay, let's get away from the ugliness of the insurance world and back into some number crunching with fact 698. Quote, the sturdiness of the ride is reflected throughout the car. The prop shaft is beefier than those on standard Plymouths, and the rear axle has a 4-pinion differential instead of a 2-pinion unit. This is certainly the most interesting Plymouth to come along in years. It's the hottest one ever. It's the most super stock in its class, and very likely will add a new dimension to the Ford Chevy stock car racing battle. These words were published in the May 1956 issue of Motor Life magazine and make it clear the road test writer liked Plymouth's new 1956 Fury. It's funny, this little model here of a Johan Plymouth Belvedere 4-door is a 1956 model, second year for this redesign, which was begun by Virgil Exner. But again, the Plymouth Fury was, Plymouth's response to the 1955 Chrysler 300 letter car, the C300. And the Fury, again, because it had 301 cubic inch engine and I think 260 horsepower, they had a 4-pinion differential in the rear axle versus the 2-pinion. So even back then in 1956, Chrysler Corporation was building their muscle cars from the back to the front, which of course means that, heavy-duty rear axle, transmission, drive shaft. If you have 500 horsepower, but you brake it every time you step on the gas, that's not any good. Chrysler knew that. Okay, let's move on. More 50s data with fact 699. The May 1957 issue of Hot Rod magazine called the new 1957 Fury, quote, surely the best handling production car in America, end quote. In its second year of production, each of the 7,438 Furies built for the 1957 model year featured dual Carter 4-barrel carburetors as standard equipment atop their 318 cubic inch polyspherical head V8s. Also new for 1957 was Chrysler's torsion bar front suspension, which replaced the coil spring arrangement used previously. And yeah, getting back to that torsion bar front suspension, unlike the 1956 and earlier Chrysler vehicles, which had traditional coil springs up front, the torsion bars, which were new for 57 on all Chrysler vehicles, from the Imperial all the way down to a little Dodge Coronet, two-door post, whatever it might be. They used a steel bar made of high-quality, I think, vanadium steel, which was anchored under the driver's seat and then was allowed to flex with the lower control arm. So that compact, long rod of metal became like a coil spring stretched out into a long rod. And actually, they were very good at jounce and rebound control, thus Motor Trend praising the Plymouth Fury's handling. Now, keep in mind, the Fury, being a high-performance car, came with heavy-duty suspension, which means the diameter of its torsion bars was larger than it would have been, say, on a Flathead 6 Plymouth Belvedere or Savoy. So Chrysler would size the components in accordance with the engine and expected performance. But again, the Fury was a very good handling car, as were all 57 Mopars with their new torsion bar front suspension. Okay, more information on insurance stuff for Fact 700. Quote, as an insurance premium beater, you can opt for the lowly 318 Cube V8, but then all you'll end up with is a sporty-looking shopping cart. The 340 is the only choice, end quote. How true, because the 383, 440, and 426 Hemi were scratched from the option list. The High Performance Cars magazine test staff put a 344 speed through its paces for a September 1972 review. Of the 16,142 Barracudas built in 1972, more than one-third, that is 6,382, were performance-oriented BS-23 CUDA 340s. As a means of throwing muscle-weary insurance agents off the scent, Plymouth offered the high-winding E55 340 small block in standard BH-23 Barracudas for a mere $292.70 over the cost of the base 318. 490 of the sleeper 340 Barracudas were built, making them even rarer than the Slant 6 powered cars, of which 809 were constructed. Yeah, this refers to the fact that 1972 was the third year for the E-body Barracuda, 70, 71, 72. But 72 was the first year that the 426 Hemi, the 383, the 6-pack 440 were no longer available. So the CUDA became a strictly small block proposition. So the 340 was the one to get. But it is funny that the CUDA 340 wasn't the end of the final word in Barracuda performance. You could actually get a Barracuda with the 340. And again, it cost a mere $292 over a 318 car. So there's a fair number of those running around. Keep in mind, you want to look at the dual exhaust coming out the back of the car. 318 cars had single exhaust. That's one way to tell a 340 powered Barracuda from the run-of-the-mill Barracudas. But again, not a lot were built. Again, we have something like 490 of them built back in the day. How many are left? Anyone's guess. Okay, at this point here, fact number 700, we conclude our Plymouth discussion. And with fact 701, we move into the world of Dodge, which is similar but not the same. It's still a Chrysler product. Okay, and again, my book is broken into subchapters, and they consist of legend and lore, body and interior, engine and driveline, suspension and brakes, and then number crunching and press commentary. And each of these subcomponents has something like 20 facts. So here we go with legend and lore from Dodge with fact 701. Gene Snow is a legendary Dodge funny car pilot. His daily driver has got to be something wild, right? Not so much. I had a chance meeting with the Snowman at the 1992 NHRA Winter Nationals in the since decommissioned Pomona Timing Tower. When I asked about his personal cars, he said, quote, "The last thing I wanted was a loud car. Got enough of that on the track," end quote. A series of luxurious Chrysler Imperials served Snow's daily needs through the 1960s and 1970s. And I got to say, here I am. It's 2021. I'm 57 years old. And I remember as a kid, about 1973, discovering the Gene Snow Dodge Charger Snowman funny car kit from Revell. And on the side of it had this word HEMI, H-E-M-I, car. I didn't know what that thing was, but I saw the blower on it. That's a cool looking engine. And when I realized this Hemi engine was something you could also get in a regular Barracuda or Roadrunner or GTX at a Plymouth dealer, and again, those cars were only 3 or 4 years old when I first discovered them in 1973 through this model kit. I thought, wow, that Hemi's a pretty potent engine. And, so that was kind of one of the beginnings of my Mopar awakening. I love them all, but Chrysler is my core. But again, Gene Snow, man, to meet him in 1992, I went there as a Chrysler Power Magazine a reporter, and there was Gene Snow. And I said, Gene, what did you drive? Did you drive a Hemi Cuda? No. Again, he drove Imperials back in the day. I think Gene Snow is still alive. I hope he is. Anyway, but a legend, really, in the realm of drag racing. Okay, let's move on to fact 702. Dodge really caused a stir by including the 1971 Challenger TA in a 6-page Dodge Scat Pack advertising insert. 1971, remember this. Bound into late 1970 issues of popular magazines such as Hot Rod, Motor Trend, and Car and Driver, it depicts a bright yellow TA Challenger complete with a black fiberglass snorkel hood with pins, TA side stripes, side exit megaphone exhaust tips, staggered E60 and G60 front and rear 15-inch tires, trunk spoiler, and rear-mounted radio antenna. Everything about it looks proper, except for the 1971 grille and reference to, quote, a standard 344-barrel V8. Some observers conclude it's simply a 1970 with a photo-retouched grille insert. To my eye, the grille and car appear real. Apparently, Dodge came close to offering the TA for a second model year in 1971, perhaps with a garden variety 4-barrel in place of the exotic 6-pack to restore some profit. And this is a pre-production prototype used in the magazine article. But it was not to be, and the 2,399 TAs built in 1970 were the only ones offered. Incidentally, Plymouth avoided similar speculation entirely. There were no references to a second coming of the 1970 AAR CUDA in 1971 new car product materials. Yeah, if you grab a copy of that, you can find it online, or again in those Hot Rods and Motor Trends and Car and Driver magazines, you will see a reference to a 71 Challenger TA. Now, we all, of course, know that Challenger TA was Dodge's homologation special to get their Challenger into the sedan Group B road race series of the SCCA Trans Am series. But again, they had 346 packs and were only available in 1970, not 71, despite the fact Dodge declared a false alarm with that bogus press car. Okay, I want to thank one thing right now. We want to thank our sponsors at High Octane Classics, the Northeast's largest muscle car and supercar dealership, located at 143 Washington Street in Auburn, Massachusetts. High Octane Classics buys and sells and services muscle cars and exotics. Give them a call at 508-859-4515. Dan Marinelli and the folks at High Octane Classics are true car people. I hang out with them once in a while. And they've got a nice selection of Mopars down there, and a lot of GTOs, Chevelles, and yes, Ferraris and Porsches if you run down that type of car too. They're all out there. Okay, let's move on. Fact 703. More than a few automotive journalists have incorrectly described the 1969 Charger Daytona as having a fiberglass nose cone and spoiler. Technically, my fellow scribes are not 100% wrong. The white with red tail Charger Daytona prototype displayed at an April 13, 1969 press preview was indeed equipped with fiberglass appendages, hapily cobbled to get the point across. Pun intended. Point, nose, get it? All right. Perhaps this is where the misinformation began. For the record, the 503 production nose cones were formed from steel panels with fiberglass headlamp bucket assemblies, and the 3-piece tail spoilers were extruded aluminum. So it is true that a lot of folks maybe saw that pre-production prototype, that press car that was shown to journalists, and it's possible some of the journalists might have touched the thing and said, "That's fiberglass," and written about it. So maybe that's where some of that comes from. And again, the Daytona Charger's nose is a pretty exotic looking thing. But there are reproductions today. Companies like Daytona, they do make fiberglass nose cones that you can actually install on a Charger and get yourself a look-alike. But the factory stuff was steel. Okay, let's move on with fact 704. The April 13th, 1969 Charger Daytona press preview prototype was also equipped with a standard tunneled Charger backlight, another unfortunate detail that spurred plenty of confusion over the years. All production Charger Daytonas were fitted with steel plugs which raised the lift-inducing recessed rear window flush with the roof sail panels. The same body modification was also applied to the to the 69 Charger 500, of which 392 were built. And again, that pre-production car at the April 13th Charger Daytona preview was a regular roof-equipped car, but we all know that the flying buttress recessed rear window was something that actually created lift in 1968 and early 69. The racers complained, so in 69 they came up with the flat window. And that's the story of that one. In fact, there have been some model kits. In fact, this MPC kit here has the correct flattened rear window. But there are some other kits on the market that have the incorrect rear window. They have the nose and the tail, but not the right window. And a little thing, too, is that, the rear window area is often a place where high-speed vehicles encounter trouble. And the BMW M3 of the mid-1980s, I saw one at Barrett-Jackson a couple weeks ago, the Houston show. And the M3 actually has a special fiberglass rear window plug and a flatter rear window than does a regular 318i or 325i. I know we're talking BMWs here on this show, which is kind of weird, but it is true that modified rear windows are not exclusive to Superbirds and Daytonas or Monte Carlo Aerocoupes or Grand Prix 2+2s of the 1980s. But again, reworking the nose of the car is only part of the aerodynamic equation. The rear half of the car also comes into play when you're going racing. Okay, let's go with fact 705. Knowing the Automobile Competition Committee of the United States, ACCUS, was intent on doubling the minimum production requirement of aerodynamically enhanced Detroit bodies for the 1970 race season, Dodge accelerated the pace of its Charger Daytona development program to take advantage of the more lenient 500-unit minimum of 1969. It's hard to believe, but design and manufacture went from pencil sketches to dealer deliveries in 27 weeks. To legalize the Daytona Charger for the race season, all 503 of the cars needed to be on their way to dealer lots by September 1st, 1969, and they were. Think about that. 27 weeks is the time that the Charger Daytona went from an idea to reality. And in 1969, again, the homologation, which is the minimum number required of a special car before it's allowed to race on a track, just 500 cars. That was really easy, of course, in the 68, 67 years. That was also the number. But for 1970, I might even get into that in some of these upcoming facts, but for 70, the ACCUS and NASCAR, they all mandated that a certain number of cars had to be built per dealership active in the country, which exploded the amount of cars that had to be built, which is why the Plymouth Superbird in 1970 had something like 1,900 cars made, 4 times as many, because they made it more difficult for car makers to create these one-off weirdos. They had to make a bunch of them. So that was the difference between 69 and 70. The homologation minimums were magnified. Okay, more Charger Daytona info with fact 706. So exactly how much help was the 69 Charger Daytona aerodynamics package? Testing revealed the nose cone and chin spoiler to be good for 200 pounds of downforce. It also offered a major reduction in drag, while the crazy rear spoiler, which rode 23.5 inches above the trunk lid, exerted in excess of 600 pounds of much appreciated downforce on the rear tires at 200 miles per hour NASCAR race speeds. Showroom stock street cars were mechanically incapable of those speeds, but drivers reported additional directional stability and fuel economy versus a standard Charger RT at road speeds over 70 miles per hour. Yeah, it's amazing, really, that the Daytona and Superbird both had very real results as an impact. And 600 pounds, that's like 3 of me sitting on the deck lid at 200 miles per hour to keep the tires in touch with the ground. And keep in mind that most cars become pretty lousy airplanes when they get to 140, 150 miles per hour. Air gets under them as much as it goes over them, and they start to plane and fly around. So that's why nose cones and spoilers and ground effect stuff in later years were so crucial and are so crucial. In fact, I think that Formula One cars of today, with their aerodynamic downforce, could actually run upside down because they have so much downforce it's more than the weight of the car. So that's a pretty cool fact. Now, the Charger Daytona, I'm sure, would not be able to run upside down, but they were certainly on their way toward aerodynamic perfection early along their way. But the Daytona was absolutely a functional package. Now, whether or not on the street that stuff ever comes into play is minimal, but again, it homologated or legalized that combo for racing, and that was the bottom line. Okay, fact 704. Oh, sorry, 708. Here we go. This is a little different. This is another Charger Daytona reference, but was that 707? Oh, okay. Yeah, you're right. Thank you, Chris. My producer, Chris Roberts, keeps me on track here. And indeed, 707 is our fact. Okay, this is some Hemi stuff. Cool. Okay. Was the 1966 426 Street Hemi's dual Carter AFB inline intake manifold originally designed to be heated by engine coolant for improved cold weather operation? Possibly. During a 1965 visit to Chrysler's Chelsea, Michigan proving grounds, High Performance Cars magazine editor Martin L. Shore photographed the 1965 Coronet 500 hardtop, complete with black vinyl top and roof and spinner wheel covers, that was fitted with a prototype 426 Street Hemi. A close look at the pictures reveals a pair of rubber heater hoses plumbed into the rear of the manifold. While eventually 1966 through 71 production Street Hemis utilized steel heat riser tubes connected to the passenger side exhaust manifold to deliver hot exhaust gases, not liquid coolant, for warming the carbs, Marty's pictures don't lie. Yeah, I remember seeing that magazine. Again, it was High Performance Cars magazine. There's a shot of Marty Shore at the Chrysler Proving Grounds. The hood's open on this Coronet. There's a puddle of coolant under the front of the car. Apparently, he must have driven it too hard or who knows what, but it overheated. But anyways, in that same photo shoot, some close-up images show the back of the chrome dome air cleaner clearly in a 65 B-body engine bay, which is different from a 66, different firewall and inner fender shapes. But there are rubber hoses running right to the back of that manifold, and they're definitely not, I'm not mistaking them for the metal hoses or tubes that went down to the back of the exhaust manifold on the passenger side. So yeah, Chrysler undoubtedly played with that. Now, if you ever study a 66, 7, 8, whatever, Street Hemi intake manifold, the two holes on the back, they are watertight. If you put water in there, it won't get into the ports, won't go down inside the valley. So it's conceivable that manifold was designed to be watertight and maybe water heated. Now, keep in mind the whole idea about heating a manifold, well, that comes down to cold weather operation. It's not something that's any good for performance because it dilutes the intake charge by making the air warmer and less dense. But on a cold day, Chrysler, like all car makers, had certain minimum standards for how much of a problem a car was in cold weather. They had to be able to start up and warm up quickly, and the Street Hemi was not exempt. So that's why they heated the intake manifold, even though it hurt performance. Now, if you look at the race Hemi with its cross ram or the Max Wedge with its cross ram, neither of those have any heating, nothing. There's zero. But the bottom line was those were race engines. The Street Hemi was a street engine, thus the heating. And early on, potentially with liquid. But we all know, of course, they ended up using exhaust gas. Okay, fact 708. Let's talk about some TV crime drama with this one here, fact 708. 4 years before starring in the hit CBS crime drama TV show Magnum P.I., which ran 1980 through 88, scruffy-faced actor-model Tom Selleck appeared in 1976 Dodge magazine print advertisements. One of the most memorable showed him with the 1976 Charger Daytona, a mild effort to rekindle memories of the Winged Warrior of 1969. Base Daytona power came from the 318 two-barrel, the 360 two-barrel, 364 barrel, and 402 barrel and 404 barrel were optional upgrades. Ironically, Dodge never asked Selleck, who played Private Detective Thomas Sullivan Magnum IV on TV, to promote the Charger's replacement, the 1978 and 78 through 79 Dodge, you guessed it, Magnum. That's something I've always wondered about, the Dodge Magnum, which came along in 78 and 79 to replace the Charger, and the Magnum PI TV show. Those two things are different, but they're kind of not. And of course, Tom Selleck was there on both of them. Kind of a weird little deal. Sometimes these things are called synchronicities, and sometimes they have meaning, sometimes they don't. Okay, the final fact on this show, which is show 48, is number 709, with more Daytona stuff. Okay, fact 709. Another Charger Daytona with Hollywood connections was bought new in 1969 by singer-actor Robert Goulet before ending up in the hands of famed LA street racing impresario Big Willie Robinson. Robinson owned two XX29J Hemi Daytonas, an orange 4-speed, which was VIN 356523, and a bright green metallic automatic, which was VIN 356525. In fact, a couple numbers apart. It is unclear which car came from Goulet's garage. What is known is that both of the incredibly rare Hemi Daytonas, only 70 were built, were extensively modified for drag racing. At least one still exists today. Yeah, it's funny. When I heard that Robert Goulet had a Hemi Daytona on order, I thought, wow, that's pretty crazy. But I got to remember, too, that Jim Morrison had a 67 Shelby GT500 dual quad 428 4-speed Mustang, and he'd use that as a daily driver. So, I guess celebrities can have hot rods too. Now, the Hemi Daytona of Big Willie was restored and exists in various forms today. In fact, one of them, I think, sold at Barrett Jackson a little while ago. Well, that's it for this episode, which is show 48 of the Steve Maggs Muscle Car Show podcast. We certainly want to thank our sponsors at OCTAIN Classics, the Northeast's largest muscle car and supercar dealership, located at 143 Washington Street in Auburn, Massachusetts. OCTAIN Classics buys and sells and services muscle cars and exotics. Give them a call at 508-859-4515. And we'll be back soon with show number 49, where we'll continue with Dodge muscle car facts. And until then, hasta mañana.